Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today we're going to be talking about revisiting Venice because we recently revisited Venice. But before we get into it, Nathaniel has one fun piece of news.
I do indeed. And before I even get into that, I am recently recovering from a cold. I am currently recovering from a cold, so I do sound a little bit funny, and I hope it does not affect your listening experience too much. If it does, I apologize. I know my normally dulcet tones are being replaced by this fun nasally tone, which is quite common actually in Venice, speaking of Venice, because it's wild to me that the accent of Venice is so nasally.
And so different from down
So
here.
different.
I had a hard time understanding people just because there's a different emphasis
Yeah.
on certain syllables and things. So,
And it's very up in the nose. Like the whole language is very up in the nose, like permesso instead of permesso, which is very like, oh, you got really into the nose for these words. That's not the news at all, though. The news is, if you have not been following, and I'm not sure why you would be, unless you're in Europe listening to this, but the current scandal surrounding Italy concerns the Eurovision, which is a competition, takes place in Europe every year, I believe, and it's basically one song from each country is entered into a competition, and people vote on the song, and these are performed live, and it's all great fun because most of these songs are normally terrible, and sometimes they're really wild and zany and wacky and exciting.
that's the thing. There's weird ones every year.
It's phenomenal. And this year, there's a song from Estonia by a singer named Tommy Cash, and the song is Espresso Macchiato. And it has been rustling some jimmies, I would say.
Is that a phrase?
Yeah, you don't get your jimmies rustled.
Okay.
I think it's one of those 1950s phrases. I don't know, maybe.
I like it. I
Right?
mean, yeah, I've never heard it, but I like it.
It is rustling jimmies, as they would say. And it is doing so because some people, it seems like the attack is being led by a far-right party in Italy named Lega, which is renamed from Lega Nord, which is the North League. But now that they have support in places that are not the North, they have just decided to rename. And they seem to be insulted by the song, basically. They seem to think it's like the whole song is an insult, but with lines such as, and these are some of my favorite, life is like spaghetti, hard until you make it. I mean, that's just Shakespearean right there. There's nothing wrong with that line. And there's also lines such as espresso, espresso, no need to be depresso. But I think some people are taking umbrage with the fact that one of the lines is sweating like a mafioso, or mafioso,
Mafioso.
because they think that he's saying everybody in Italy is a mafia, like in the mafia. And that doesn't seem like what he's saying at all. It's just literally one line out of this entire song that is about, I guess, coffee. And another group of people are very angry because he's drinking coffee out of a paper cup in the music video. And they would say Italians would never drink coffee out of a paper cup, which is categorically untrue. Sometimes you will get coffee served in a paper cup because they don't want to wash the ceramic cups. That is a holdover actually just from COVID. Pre-COVID, it never would have happened. But post-COVID, a lot of people use...
But the one he's drinking out of is more of a latte-sized
And it's
cup.
like a Starbucks cup.
Yeah.
You can see part of the logo. So it's a little bit insulting.
Is it a Starbucks cup?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just thought it was a...
I think there's a green... you can see part of the green logo of the Starbucks thing.
I didn't see that. Okay.
And I think that's what he turns it away from the thing so he doesn't get sued by Starbucks.
But he's also not drinking a macchiato. He pours cold milk
It's a
into...
macchiato freddo.
Yeah. So I took the whole music video to just be kind of silly.
That's the whole thing. It seems like it's just a fun little thing. And he's, and the guy was like, I like Italy. I don't know. I thought it was, cute. So, but it's definitely taking Italy by storm. Some people are offended. Some people think it's funny. Some people have no problem with it. If you're curious, you can look up the song by Tommy Cash called Espresso Macchiato. I don't want to play it for you and get sued by anybody or kicked out of the country. So, without further ado, without any more news or any more, statements of my well-being, I guess we can jump right into it.
Yeah. So we recently visited Venice. It was my second time in Venice, and we were only there for 3 days, and it was during Carnevale. And although it was only 3 days, it felt like a lifetime.
Really did, yeah.
I think a lot of that is because we walked a lot to just take in the city and things as much as we could. So it was pretty exhausting, but it was great. And we have some updates. We've done a few episodes on our experience in Venice.
I think just the one.
Just one?
Just
oh,
on
okay.
is Venice theme park, I think is what we did. Which was back
and
in...
then the Venice city tax? Did we talk about that?
We did talk about that in August. We talked about... because the tax was ending The tax is only for the summer. For those of you listening, it's only for the summer and only for certain days. So we did an episode when it had finally finished, and they were looking forward to next year, basically trying to figure out, are they going to, because this was experimental, 1 year only, are they going to continue it for next year, or was that a one-shot deal? They made a ton of money that has gone nowhere, and so people are really excited by the fact that turns out you can ask people for extra money and they'll say yes. And I think this is, to be clear, this is not on top of the already there city tax. This is a tax if you're staying in Mestre or outside of Venice and coming in for the day. I say that because the city tax in Venice, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, so please don't hold me to this, is not like other cities where it's a flat tax year round, but it does change based on the season. I think they had a little sign when we checked into our hotel that said if you're basically, it's like in the winter season, you pay less per night than if you're in the summer season, which seems to be a way to alleviate some of that, or to make a little more money, I guess, in the summer. But when we went to Florence right afterwards, it was a whopping like €6 per person per night.
It was a lot.
That does not change.
And so what Nathaniel's talking about is when you get to the hotel, there's a tax that you have to pay in cash. We've talked about that before in other episodes. And it's called the city tax, right?
Yeah.
And usually there's a cap on how many days you pay it, but I
think it's 7 days.
Okay. It's a tax per person per night.
Yeah. And it typically does not include kids under the age of 12, I believe.
Okay.
Or there's other things like that. And the same thing with this €5 entry fee. There's a lot of things it won't include. But again, that's not the issue. The issue is basically people who live in Venice saying like, this isn't going to help, alleviate the massive issue. But one of the things I think we wanted to revisit, if you wanted to take us away, is, well, I guess the question was, is Venice now that we've been to Venice for 3 nights, is Venice like a theme park?
In many ways, yes.
I just actually paused there to hand Darcy the notes so we had notes to read, but because I took notes today, not Darcy, she cannot read them. So she will be...
Meaning your handwriting is not legible.
Meaning my handwriting is not legible, not that she has lost the ability to read perfectly clear English. And I did want to also throw out just very, very briefly that one of the reasons we feel, I don't know, empowered to talk about, what do we know about Venice after 3 nights? Basically, we don't live there. We don't really know anything about it. But I think it's the same thing. Like if you're American and you visit another city, you can kind of do that thing where you compare things in your city to things in this city. And especially the more places in America you visit, the more you can make a comparison to be like, oh, is this a Midwest thing? Or is it just a Minnesota thing? Or is it just a St. Paul thing? Or that is in Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm like, wow, that's just completely wrong. And I think that's the thing with Italy, because we live in Italy. We've lived in Italy for 5 or 6 years, and we've been visiting it for 10, or not 10 before that, but 5 before that, 10 altogether. I think we have a lot of experience from around Italy, basically. And so when we do go to Venice, I think we view it as a lens of people who live in Italy and who are fairly Italian at this point. Not espresso macchiato Italian, but
we are used to Italian culture.
We're used to Italian culture.
We're very much not Italians, but we have been inside the culture for a while. So,
and it's kind of like one of those things, like if you go somewhere and you're like, oh, everybody in, I don't know, Paris does this thing, and then you talk to somebody who's French, it's like, no, that's just the French thing. We all do. That's just being in France. So I think when we talk about stuff in Venice, when it's weird for us, it's because we have not seen that anywhere else. And it seems super un-Italian to do that thing, to the point like we make fun of that in the other parts of Italy for that thing, whether it's, well, I think like some people in the South sort of gently poke fun at the North for having dinner when the light's still out at 3:30 in the afternoon. That is a joke.
Fair thing to make fun of.
Yes. Nobody has dinner at 3:30, but there is that there are some cute little jabs across the border, the north-south border. But sometimes there's things in Venice that seem highly specific to Venice, mainly because of its status as a sort of tourist hub, and it's been a tourist hub for 700 years. So yes, with that being said, as we launch into this, I want to be clear. I just want to say, it's from our perspective as people who do live in Italy and who have traveled through the coast, through the south, through the north, spent time in Rome and Helsinki, and sort of learned about different areas and figured out so when we go to Venice, it's like, this is different. This is weird. It's not like what you might find in the rest of Italy, if that makes sense. So starting us off, free entry. Please explain this to me, Darcy.
Okay, this is weird. A lot of shops in Venice, you'll see a little handwritten sign that says free entry. And it boggled our minds because this sign is in just regular shops that you can wander into. And it's to us, I would assume like, of course, this is a knick-knack shop. Of course I want to go in. And of course it's free because it's a shop. That's how shops work. I feel like I'm saying shop a lot, but
Negozio.
exactly. But I think they say this because it can be easy for tourists to assume that things that look fun are not free because, for instance, the churches in Venice charge to get into. Like there's someone sitting in a little booth inside it looks like a toll booth inside the church to charge you for entry, where a lot of other cities you don't have to pay to enter every church. And sometimes, it's nice to give €1 or whatever, just
in the collection box,
exactly.
Donation box, yeah.
But you don't have to. And I think there are a lot of things in Venice that you do have to pay to get into. So then the shops feel the need to put free entry on their doors so that you enter. It just felt weird.
But it's one of those things where it almost makes, it's sort of like when you have a sign that says free entry, it does give the impression that other places will not have free entry.
Exactly.
Rather than like anywhere, like literally anywhere else in the world where, no, of course you can go into a store. And of course you don't have to buy something in a store. You just go in to browse. That's a thing we do. And I think so having free entry on like, and not necessarily even like, as you mentioned, sort of like a knick-knack store. It's like not necessarily antique stores, not necessarily places to get masks for like the Carnevale, but just like, stores like, a candy store had free entry. And it's like, no, of course. I want to go see candy. Like, I don't mind not buying any candy. It's, but I would like to go look at it. So I think that was a different one. And actually, even on the churches, that is a great example of something that if you only were to go to Rome and nowhere else in Italy, you might get the impression that all churches in Italy are free. And in fact, it's a very specific to Rome that only in Rome are all churches free by a Roman decree. And I think it's actually the Pantheon is now the only church in Rome that is not free. It charges a few euros to enter. But for years, that was considered a church and not necessarily like a monument. So it was free entry. But in Siena, you have to go to the Duomo there. You have to pay to go to the Duomo there. Like, not the Duomo, thankfully, in Florence, but there might be ones in Florence you have to pay for. But all that being said it is interesting where if you were to not go to Rome, you would think paying to get into a church is normal. But in Rome, it's not normal. Kind of interesting. The other thing, though, is also the arrows. We talked about this very briefly in the Venice a theme park episode, but there are arrows like pointing you towards the Piazza San Marco or the Ponte Rialto, the Rialto Bridge, or the train station. And kind of tying in with that, I think, is the fact that from a outside point of view, it's easy to think that you can just wander around Venice and get lost and end up in different areas and have like, and
that it's all sort of interconnected.
Yeah. And we found trying to do that it is to some degree, but when you're trying to go to the heavy hitting spots like the Piazza San Marco, like the Rialto Bridge, it's really only 2 or 3 ways to get there. And because the canals have blocked off all the other streets, a lot of the streets are lead to dead ends. And I cannot tell you the amount of times we went down a street that was a dead end only to get way down the street and realize, oh, this really doesn't go anywhere. And some of that is because we just didn't want to use a map. And some of that is because, I don't know, we just wanted to kind of get lost. But we wanted to also find a way to the famous sites that was not like with a surge of other people.
The main way, yeah.
Yeah.
With a mass of people, exactly.
When that was the big thing is it felt like, oh, if you're going to go to the Rialto Bridge, you just follow this swarm of people. And it's not unlike, I imagine, like a school of fish migrating or not even migrating, just swimming. It just feels like you're in this flow through the town. And kind of on this going just, again, is Venice a theme park? Were the police?
The police.
Yeah. And it was kind of interesting because, again, in literally every other Italian city, police are police. And yes, they will help you with directions, whatever. But here, they were setting up like the stanchions with the little...
And this did feel specific to Carnevale. And essentially, there being crowds. This might be something that happens in the summer as well because the crowds are massive in the summertime. And basically, like Nathaniel said, they set up stanchions down certain heavily trafficked streets. And then the police, I love this, the police were positioned at either end with their arms outstretched and telling people, to go to the right. Luckily in Italian, they all basically spoke English, but at least they were speaking Italian. So that the flow of people could be orderly. They were also in certain areas, I think on the Ponte Rialto, they were telling people not to stop.
Yeah.
And there were
actually almost all bridges.
Okay.
They were, because even on the website, I will say on the Venice website, not only does it say walk on the right, it asks people, like, it basically says, do not walk in the middle of an alleyway, walk on the right of an alleyway, so people can walk on the right coming towards you. But it also is very clear, do not stop on bridges and take photos. And I think you can, it's just, as we noticed,
if it's stopping traffic and there's 100 people on a bridge, that's bad.
Yeah, we noticed, because we talked to people who said that basically the crowd in Carnival and the crowd in the summer are not dissimilar. And I wouldn't be surprised if in certain days in the summer it's more than Carnival, because Carnival is amazing and it's part of why people go to Venice, but it's also cold and winter and, not like the best time to see Venice if you're...
And also not when everybody has classic time off work.
That's a good point. Yes, February. Like, that's not a great time off. But no, I think that is the sort of thing to keep in mind, is that when people are walking these giant crowds and they all stop on the bridge, it creates the congestion. And we did talk about this before in that episode, I think, because it just, or maybe the Venice tourist tax one, because they were coming out with a law that basically prevented certain size tour groups. And what we noticed, I think we mentioned this is Venice a theme park, and even what we notice now is, like, genuinely, I'm not a narrow person as a human being. I mean, physically, not like narrow-minded. Hopefully I'm not that narrow-minded. But I'm broad, but not massive. But there were certain alleyways that, like, Google's like, yeah, you have to go down there to get where you're going. And there are people waiting on either end of the alleyway because only one person at a time can go through.
Yes.
So it's like, imagine a tour group going through there. It's a nightmare. And even the ones where it's only two people side by side. But something I noticed with, walking around with you is that, like, there was very few places you and I could walk around side by side.
Absolutely.
The entire time we're walking, like, single file, talking to each other over our shoulder, like, where do we want to go next kind of thing. And there was almost nowhere to pull off to try to, like,
reassess.
Yeah. It was just like, if you're going to pull off, it's in a storeway, which on the Venice website, they say, do not pull off in the middle of not storeway. What is it? Storefront. Do not pull off into a storefront. Do not stop on our bridge. It's like, wait to get to Piazza and then stop kind of thing. And we noticed a lot of people would stop for, a variety of things, whether it was like, one person stopped in front of us, I think, at one point, because they were taking a bite of their ice cream, so they needed to slow down and stop. And I'm like, there are 80 people behind us. You need to
and it's hard because
walk and lick.
There are some amazing shops in Venice and a lot of artisans there and local people who make really cool things. And a lot of their shops, which makes sense, are on the main thoroughfare because they want customers.
Yeah.
And it's hard because a lot of people want to stop abruptly and look at something in the window, which is completely understandable, but then it stops up everybody following them, and there are hundreds of people behind this person who stopped to look at some cute little thing in a window. So it's hard, and like you're saying, everybody is essentially funneled through certain streets to main attractions because there are only so many ways to get there.
And that's the thing. And I'm reading these notes now, too, to make sure I also cannot read these, by the way, to be very clear. I'm not sure
great.
what this...
One thing, can I mention while you're
Please.
looking at the notes? I meant to mention this whenever you talked about street signs and arrows.
Yeah.
In addition to there being street signs attached to buildings where you would expect them on corners and things, which are genuinely helpful, especially if you don't want to use your phone for maps, they will point you in the direction you need to go. But there are also really beautiful mosaic directions on the ground in certain areas.
Yeah, there are.
And they are less for sort of public attractions and more for certain shops. Or I think occasionally they'll have the Vaporetto, which is the water taxi, will be in a mosaic.
Oh, yeah, and a little on the ground. Yeah.
But they are really lovely. But again, that can add to the sense of this being less of a city and more of a specifically tourist attraction because they are pointing you in the direction of someplace you can purchase something, not a public space.
That's the thing. It wasn't so much like, here's a park or here's a bench. And that was the other thing. Like, and actually there are, it's a nice segue. There are rules on, for instance, where you can eat outside. And that basically just includes, you can't eat on the steps of a church. You cannot eat on a bridge. You cannot eat on the steps of the canal. You cannot eat pretty much, like, I think in the Piazza San Marco, unless you're at the cafe or restaurant, you can't just sit in there and eat unless you're at one of the designated areas, which I think are like benches. And it kind of does, again, or the Rialto Bridge is another one. You can't sit on the steps of the Rialto Bridge and eat. You can't even sit on the steps of the Rialto Bridge typically. Like, I think on the Venice website, they ask you not to sit on those steps. So there is this overwhelming sense that there are so many rules, and it's more akin to a theme park and less akin to a city, where I think city rules are by and large the same across like all cities everywhere, you
Right.
know?
You just abide by laws.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of go about your business.
There's not like these really hyper specific ones that are, you know, you have to do this in this area at this time or else, or, you know, or don't do this thing. And I think there are these wells throughout the towns, and a lot of people like to sit on the wells. And I think actually while we were there, I only know that because there's an article about it, that somebody was fined, a group of tourists were fined like 4,000 euros for eating while sitting on the wells. So it's very much not like no one's kidding kind of thing about it. And it's, I guess there's something to keep in mind while you're there is, again, it feels kind of theme park-esque because these are rules, not necessarily law. I mean, they're laws, very much laws, but they are passed off as if they are rules for Venice. And it's kind of like rules for Disneyland.
Before you keep going, you told me like I find it fun, but maybe the people participating didn't. But the two tourists who were making coffee on the Ponte Rialto.
We weren't there, but I read an article because for this thing, I wanted to find out make sure these laws are real laws and not just like, I don't know, specific to Carnivale. And there was an article from last year. 2 tourists from Berlin were fined for making a coffee on the steps of the Rialto Bridge. Not just making a coffee, but they brought a portable stove to brew coffee, which is wild to me on so many levels. But it's also like, that's where you choose. Like, you might have gotten away with that in like a smaller area, like in a park, on a bench, something like that. But I'm like, you chose one of the most heavily trafficked areas. And the only thing I can think of is like maybe they were doing it for a video or something. Like there's a, you know, Instagram video, TikTok video, which I'm going to stick it in here now, I guess, but just there was definitely an overwhelming I mean, there were people running around pushing past us with YouTube channels on their shirt, basically, with like unholding things and talk. I mean, there was like so many people there for their YouTube channels, and it was like, wow, this is sort of weird. When I mean, I don't know, I hate to sound like somebody who traveled in the 90s or something like that, where they're like, oh, it was better back then, but it was so different to be. I think it must be so different to travel now, where everything's about the content you create and how you post it and how you can share it. And so much, I say this, by the way, being fully aware we are doing a podcast, which is about content, but at least it's sort of in hindsight, we're not in Venice right now, like at a cafe talking.
I think it's a respect thing.
Yeah.
I think if you're not harming anybody else and you're being conscious, like we saw a lot of people who were clearly taking Instagram photos for themselves, for their own Instagram.
Yeah.
And while I hope that those groups of people can also just be in the moment and have fun without having to post pictures to Instagram, that's my own personal thing, and that's kind of none of my business. They weren't hurting anybody. However, in the instance of the people who were rushing around the city with massive, cameras and gimbals and giant setups, pushing past people for their own YouTube channel, that to me is a disrespect of the people around you.
Yeah.
So that's a different situation.
I think it's a different thing. Yeah. And I guess kind of moving in, because I'm so desperately trying to read this, and there's no way we're talking about cask blue, a loaf of study. I don't know what that means. But one of them is very blue water, and it sounds so silly, but the canals are, at least on one of the days, were very vibrantly blue. Mm-hmm. And I can totally see somebody getting there. And I think there are canals in Epcot. Where's the one where they make it look like somebody else in Disneyland? Epcot. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I can totally see if you think they dyed the water to be not like, that's not the Adriatic, that's just some fake water there. Mm-hmm. It does look, again, quite fake. And there's a few others, which most of these are about basically, as you mentioned off air, that the restaurants are just expensive.
Yes, it's so expensive. And part of that is the same, I'm guessing the same as a theme park. You're kind of trapped there.
Yeah.
When you're not trapped in Venice, you can leave.
Yeah.
But because they know they have a captive audience, let's say, they can charge more. And I'm sure their rent is quite high, so maybe they have to charge more. But there is that sense that just like in theme parks, you pay way more for regular food than you do outside.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same thing. Some places were quite cheap for lunch, but then for dinner, it's like double the cost. And I'm like, okay, I get you have to, but oh my gosh, we can't because you and I spent basically the entire time eating cicchetti, which we'll get into in a second, like the little finger food, or like pizza or random thing. Like we were just, the sit down restaurant was like
way out
minimum
of our budget.
100 something euros. And we just thought there's no way, for essentially a plate of pasta that is something we can absolutely make at home. Mm-hmm. So that is just something that also gave that feel where just, again, like which of the 3 Disney cafes do we want to eat at, which is how it's kind of how it felt, and not so much of like which of these authentic, homemade, amazing, seafood restaurants kind of thing. So it was a little bit of a strange thing. I also think this is less about maybe moving past the theme park unless you have other things you remember. We'll go back for sure. Mm-hmm. But one of them was like where to stay, because I think that's the other thing is it's basically when it comes to Venice, you can stay in Venice. You're in the middle of the action. You're going to pay a little bit extra, but it's nice. You can stay in Mestre, which is on the coast, on the Italian coast specifically.
But it is very much like on the land. It's not an island.
Correct,
like
yeah. And it's cheap in comparison. It's usually it's probably anywhere between 20 and 50% cheaper, depending where you stay in Mestre. There's also some nice hotels in Mestre if you wanted more like a pool and land and things. If you weren't just going to see Venice, like if you were going to use Venice as a home base to see maybe not Parma, but what is it? Verona, I think is near, or Padua or something like that.
I think they're both up there.
Yeah, you can easily use a place in Mestre because that train station will, get you to where you're going just as easily as Venice will. Or you can stay in a place like Murano, which is an island near Venice.
Famous for its glass.
And one of the reasons I wanted to mention it, though, is because it ties into the Vaporetto, and I guess kind of into this feel of being a theme park, where the Vaporetto is like €9.50 per person per, like, I think it's a 100-minute ticket or 70-minute ticket. And I don't know if we've talked about this in the Rome episode, where the ticket is actually good for 100 minutes. So if you go on a bus one way and you come back on a train the other way, you're fine. As long as it's within 100 minutes, you're good. Mm-hmm. And this, I'm not sure if it's good for one way in 75 minutes or if it's good for as long as you want to use it, 75 minutes. But it just meant going anywhere in the Vaporetto, which is essentially the water bus, was
not a gondola.
Not a gondola. Yeah,
it looks like a ferry.
Yeah. It's a 20 euros for 2 of us. And it was just sort of, it's 150, as you mentioned again off mic, it's 150 if you live in Venice and you have
which is awesome. Yeah. I'm totally behind charging tourists more in order to subsidize, potentially, I don't know if this is what they're doing, but it seems like in order to subsidize the people who actually live in the city. That seems like a great plan. And as a tourist, $9.50 for a boat ride that is necessary depending on where you are in the city is a lot.
Yeah.
And before we booked our hotel, I was looking at hotels in Murano because I thought maybe they're less expensive and it would be interesting to be in a place that's not so busy in the evenings, because Carnival is going on and I knew the center of the city would be packed. However, it seemed that at least during this time, the hotels were the same price, roughly, in the center of Venice versus being in Murano, and the Vaporetto cost is astronomical at $9.50 per person per ride. So that was it shot it out of our budget.
Not to mention, if you are somebody who has like a brand loyalty and you have a lot of Hilton reward points, you might notice that there is a Hilton in Venice. And actually, I believe it inhabits its own island,
I think so.
Which is fascinating, but also again means that you might be saving money by staying at the Hilton, or you might be like, I want to gain more Hilton points by staying at the Hilton in Venice. But if every time you're going back to your hotel is a minimum of $9.50 per person, it does add up quickly. And as we noticed, it was just so nice to have a hotel. And this is what we'll talk about in our travel tip episode at the end of the month. But it's so nice to have a centrally located hotel to either drop off the stuff you bought or just to go and, use the bathroom for a place that's free, because everywhere else is like, oh, I have to pay money to, I think actually I take that back. Venice does have public toilets, which
they do, but I believe you have to pay.
Yes. Yeah. Which again, awesome. Love they have public toilets. It is not as common as you would think, because I feel like I think Portugal has public toilets. France, Scotland, both have public toilets. And Italy seems like they would, but I guess because public urination is not illegal in Italy, it might not occur to other cities to do it, because we've seen in Rome sometimes people will out having beers at a bar, not at a weird scummy bar, but oh, that's a nice €7 a beer bar, and then they just take a step off to the side and pee against the wall and then come back. Which is fascinating.
It doesn't happen that often. It's not like there's pee everywhere.
It is much more common to see it. If you're ever going to take a bus around Italy, you will, or drive, but a bus is a good way to see it. It's frequent to see people pull over on the side of the road in those little carve outs. I don't know what those are called, but you're supposed to pull over if you have an emergency or something and pee there. That seems like everybody on road trips are just like, why would I stop at a rest stop when I could pee on the side of the road? So I guess that's kind of cool. So if you especially with kids, it seems like in my mind, I go to kids, it's as a kid who had traveled around, was always like, I have to pee all the time for some reason.
Yeah.
It was nice to,
kids.
yeah,
Just are
exactly.
that way.
Well, because I think, I mean, I don't know, I feel like every time we take care of kids, like your niece or my cousins, it's always like, it's like there's no, I'm like, you have no warning. Did you not
Oh, no, they
know?
don't. Nope.
You know, like 20 minutes beforehand.
It has to happen now.
Yeah, like we were fine, we're playing, we're having a good time, and all of a sudden I'm going to piss myself in matter of seconds. And someone sprinting to the nearest like hotel. Can they use your bathroom? I promise. That was my uncle with me. Like he would, like anytime we were in New York, I'd have to I'm all of a sudden he was trying to avoid the fountains. He's like, I don't want you to, because if we're like Washington Square Park, he's like, I don't want you to hear the running water. And I'm like, I don't care.
That's adorable.
So I think that in Italy it sort of avoids that entirely by saying like, just pee wherever you want. Throw some bottled water on it. I don't know. Hope for the best. So this has gotten so off topic.
Fun tangent.
I know, wasn't it? So all that being said is, yeah, I think that even might make it, Venice feel a little bit more like a theme park, is the fact there are public toilets, which is, of course there are, but especially I think coming as an American, which I don't know if there's any, I mean, this is a this is a blanket statement. I don't know if there's any cities in America that have public toilets.
Well, we come from a city with public toilets.
Oh, okay, a welcome center.
I guess it's the Welcome Center, the one downtown.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, because this is the thing. So the Welcome Center might have public toilets, but that would be it. Like, but if you're walking around, there's no that's a city run, because I'm thinking between when I was in China and most of Europe have places like I just mentioned that have public toilets, which is just like a building you go into with a bunch of public toilets, and then you, which and a lot of them are free, some of them aren't, but I think the one in France and the ones in the UK or at least Scotland were free.
That's cool.
Yeah. So all that being, which I mean, even here, like all the train stations and stuff like that have toilets, but you have to pay for them. Mm-hmm. But all this, talking about toilets a lot, we can do a whole episode on toilets. But all that being said, is that this does make it seem like a bit of a theme park, I think. Mm-hmm. So what else?
I want to go back and talk about the Vaporetto.
Oh yeah,
because we didn't take the Vaporetto the first time. We didn't have to. This time we had a small bag of luggage. Our one bag. No, we did have backpacks.
Only a bag.
And a backpack this time. Because it was chilly and we needed to bring extra clothes and we were gone for 6 days and all of that. So we took the Vaporetto for the first time and it was packed. And so just to let everybody know, so you buy a ticket and then you do have to validate your ticket. And there's a little swinging doors. What are those called?
Yeah, they're not the turnstile, but they are just mechanical doors that swing open.
Mm-hmm. So you have to validate your ticket, the doors will open, and then you can enter and find which line you need to be in for the ferry, for the Vaporetto. And we had to wait for 2 ferries to go by, right?
Yeah, because they have like a kind of a maximum capacity.
Mm-hmm, which makes sense. And it was just very crowded. And once we got onto the Vaporetto, because we are who we are and we've traveled, we make a beeline to the back, even though it's crowded, because I think a lot of people were nervous that they were going to miss their stop if they went all the way to the back, because we were packed like sardines. But luckily, you and I are at the point now that we can just politely push past people if we have to.
Again, to that point where we're so Italian that we can just like permesso and then just like shove our way forward.
Yeah. And so we did that, and I guess I lost my train of thought, but the point is that the Vaporetto can be very crowded. Mm-hmm. So just be aware of that. And just like a subway, you have to watch out for your stops, which can be hard because they're not necessarily listed that well. So, but we used Google Maps and we kind of knew roughly where we needed to be.
And they have like a little sign on them, but I mean, on the stops themselves with the thing, but it's like, if you're not paying attention, it can be not difficult to miss a stop. Which again, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you can cross from one side of Venice to the other side in 45 minutes. But when you have luggage or when you have, anything like that, you don't necessarily want to sometimes walk, because I think we climbed, I looked at my little Apple thing of like how many, steps you've taken. But I think after like one day we climbed 10 flights of stairs, and that was just going up and down the bridges. Yeah, which is kind of fun. The other thing I did, I wanted to mention actually was slightly related to this, and it's mostly related to Carnivale. But I just wanted to, as a last little thought, or at least my last little thought on Venice as a theme park, is during Carnivale, we're going to talk about this, but it's people dress up. It's amazing. It's fantastic. There is an overwhelming feeling, though, that people don't understand that the people who are dressing up are sometimes they're Venetian, but we saw a lot of people who were not from Venice, let alone from Italy, who just dressed up because that's what they wanted to do. It was a fun thing. That was their part of their vacation. And it was really common for people to go up to them and tell them to stop so they could take their photo, or just go up and put their arm around them like, photo, right? As if they were like Mickey or the dog fellow in
Pluto?
Goofy.
Okay.
Or Pluto at like Disney World, where you just run up to the thing, you're like, oh, can I get your picture?
And I think something important to mention is that what are they called? Cast members in Disney? They are people who are paid and trained to do that. And they also often, to my understanding, have other park workers with them to protect them and to protect other people. There's a whole system around that. And like you're saying, in Venice, these are not paid actors.
Right.
And they certainly don't have, not like bodyguards.
No, but they don't have like handlers or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a gobsmacking to me that because a lot of these people are tourists.
Yeah.
And even if they're from Venice, they're just living their lives in their cool costumes, just out and about. And other people in, regular clothes would walk up to them and touch them. And stop them and almost force, like a lot of people wouldn't ask for a photo. They would just be like, photo now, look at my, partner over there taking our photo. And it was really not respectful for the way a lot of people did it. Some people were very nice, walked up, asked, things like that. But it's just so important to remember that they're just people living their lives. Like, it is not okay in my mind to force them into taking a photo, to touch them, to anything like that. You just gotta treat people like people.
Well, I think this is also like, Americans, I feel like maybe understand this not more than anybody else, but just in the sense of we have Halloween, and on Halloween you do not run up to somebody and force them to take a photo. They're not doing Halloween for you. They're doing Halloween for themselves. So it's weird to go up and try to like force them into a photo when you would never do that to anybody else. It's like
of course, a lot of these people were happy to take photos with people because I think that's.
Some of them were very clear, like, no, and they would just walk away. Like, again, I'm not here for that. Like, there's a lot happening with I will say there's mass competitions, there's balls, there's other little things. So it's like, maybe people are on their way somewhere. We often saw people on their way. And sometimes hanging around St. Mark's Square, there was 50, 60 people masked up and dressed up and like happy to take photos. And it seemed really cool. But some people were just clearly on vacation and dressed up. And like I said, we'll get into the Carnival episode more. But it clearly seemed like people who didn't realize that's what would be happening and felt very unprepared. And it kind of was like, you can kind of tell some people are like quite taken aback.
One thing that I do feel like is related to theme parks, and this is a big problem with Disney as well, is that people don't act like there's any danger around them. They just kind of walk around with abandon. And there was one instance in Venice of a stilt walker, very, very impressive person, all dressed up, walking on stilts, and someone walked up to them and was touching them, which seems to me very dangerous, and also sort of forcing this person to stay in one spot for a long time. And all of it was just an interaction that to me seemed very unsafe for the stilt walker and for other people around because of this one person wanting to take photos and wanting to touch the person on stilts. And I just think it's so important to remember that safety is a concern.
Yeah, well, and I think, but part of it just ties back to the fact that this is not a theme park. They are not there for you. They are just there as tourists typically, or just doing what they're, the touristy thing.
Just living their life.
Yeah, so I wanted to throw that in this episode, and we'll talk about the Carnival episode. I keep saying that, but just because these are the things I think that when you, if Carnival was the first time you ever went to Venice, it's easy to get the impression that this is how it is probably year round. And for us, it was one of those like, this is really weird. Like, this is really abnormal, like for behavior from anybody. So like, you would never, kind of the same thing. Like, again, it's like the in Times Square, you pay people for the photo with Spider-Man, or this photo with Optimus Prime or whatever. And I think not so much anymore, but Rome, I know it used to be more common for people to dress up as like gladiators or centurions or whatever around the Colosseum and be like, €5 for a photo kind of thing. We haven't seen that last couple of times we've been in Rome, but I assume it still happens at some point. And no, it just is like, so, but it's interesting, like that there's almost like that kind of ceases to exist in Carnivale in Venice. Something else I wanted to revisit, we touched on briefly just about safety, was pickpockets.
Yes.
We've talked about, we have a pickpocketing episode. We've talked about like how to kind of be aware of it, how to guard yourself. Somebody actually in line in front of us at the Vaporetto stand when we first got there pointed out that the sign does not say pickpocketers will be prosecuted, but just simply beware of pickpockets, or pickpockets. And I think that makes more sense because, I think you at a certain point, you're not going to stop people from picking pockets. It's an incredibly dense crowd and just impossible to, it is impossible to follow you through a crowd, let alone like if I had to
Darcy?
sprint. Yeah. Sorry, you, Darcy. But if I had to sprint after somebody, especially as like a police, you can't like I'm thinking you can't like, oh, I'm gonna stand against the wall and let the police run past. I was like, I can't stand it. There's no space for you to run. Like, so if you get pickpocketed, that's it. But something
It's a preventative action versus prosecution. I think is helpful.
And I think something we noticed is the amount of people who, and I'm using basically men and women as an example, because a lot of men, it seems like retired older men who had like cameras, it's like that. They took that up as their,
like a nice camera.
yeah, it's like I'm retired now, so I'm going to spend $10,000 on a camera, and it's just like, oh my god, we're not going to go to Venice so you can take photos of birds. Please don't. That was like the thing.
Seems highly specific.
Well, no, because like there was ducks, and there's this one dude with his like giant lens taking a picture of a duck, and his wife was sitting next to him, and she was like, "Oh my god, this is not our vacation, is it?" And I get it. I totally feel it. It feels like that's a classic thing. We're just like, we're retired, we're gonna go have fun. You're just taking pictures of ducks, like tighten it up. So, but it was the thing was like I often saw men taking photos with their camera bags open, like they were to swap out lenses. And I often saw women taking photos of their phone with their purses. And
just open. Not on their person either.
Yeah, sometimes they would put it down to take a photo because like, they don't want another photo or something, fine. And sometimes they hand it to somebody else, but sometimes they're just on the ground next to them. And I thought like, I'm not even a pickpocket. And I would make a killing here. This would be so, again, to be clear, I don't want to steal anybody's stuff, but it was just like, we were going up to like the Rialto Bridge, Ponte Rialto, and this woman in front of me had her bag open and there was like a wallet and a phone. I was like,
We're clearly visible.
yeah, I'm like, I don't even want to steal it, but like, it almost sounds like this is, you should not do this. I feel like this is again, don't steal. Very clearly, do not steal. But I meant like, and not
But
to
also
victim blame,
as a person, just to protect, like keep your belongings on you.
Yeah.
Don't make yourself an easy target.
And that's how
because
it
there
feels
will
like.
be pickpockets around. They're going to be people who are being criminals and doing bad stuff no matter where you are. So just do your best to keep yourself safe.
And again, this is not to like the victim blame. It's just more about this exists. It has always existed. We're never going to probably not exist with pickpockets, but it's just because that's just a way that people make money, and it's so I guess this is my thought. Like, I always thought that people were like, these pickpockets were incredibly talented, and some of them probably are.
Like,
but
was it like David Blaine or something?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
really good at it? Yeah.
And that fellow Apollo Robbins.
Yeah, that's who I'm thinking of.
And I'm like, so I always assumed it's like that. I'm like, oh, you took the lens off my camera while I wasn't even looking. And not like, oh, you left your camera bag open on the ground in full view of me and a bridge full of people that I could easily take a walk away and nobody would find me.
Yeah.
So it just felt a little bit like if you're gonna bring a camera, if you're gonna bring stuff, and I think one thing mentioned, we'll talk about this as a travel tip later, but it's more of like, you and I went out with just the passports because, as we've mentioned previously, but I mentioned now, if you're American or not European citizen, you do have to have documentation on you at all times traveling around Italy. Legally speaking, you need to have your passport on you at all times. If you are stopped by a cop, they can ask you for your identification, and if you cannot produce it, they can fine you. It's really up to them whether or not they want to follow you back to your hotel room until you get your passport, or just go ahead and fine you. But so you have to travel around with passports, but I think we only traveled around with one wallet or one set of cards, basically.
I think we took out a card.
Yeah.
And passports.
And phone. One phone.
Yeah, you had your identity card because that works for you, but I had to have my passport.
And we had one phone to take photos with, and that was it.
And everything was in Nathaniel's pockets.
Well, because I had inside pockets on my jacket. Yeah.
Exactly. Not because you're the man.
Right. No, because I was like, you had a jacket that didn't have the inside pocket. I had the zippered inside pocket, so it was easy to keep everything where like I could easily access it without feeling like I was going to get pickpocketed.
Exactly.
And I just realized, and that's what we planned on going there. And once we were there, we just realized that everyone here still has like the phone sticking out of the back pocket. Like there's no sense that like that's not safe. Anyway, so that was just as a warning of safety. I think Venice often gets this rap as like filled with pickpockets, and I'm like, well, it might be, but also if you're a pickpocket, that is definitely the place to go.
Yeah.
That is like
could just be 5 pickpockets and a lot of people just with their stuff open on the ground.
That's going to be
just clean it up.
It feels like this is a very pro pickpocket podcast.
Yes,
all of a sudden,
we don't mean to come across that way. I'm not pro pickpocket. Please don't steal.
Yeah, and that would be not super. So we're not supporting pickpockets on a just wide basis. Moving on past this into food.
Yes.
We wanted to talk about these cicchetti bars that we had sort of previously brought up and never really went into deep depth a little bit, but not too much.
One thing I did want to mention so that I don't forget is that if you go to grocery stores to get little snacks and water, please stay hydrated, everybody. In particularly, it felt like Venice, you had to scan your receipt to exit, which is not something you have to do everywhere. So I just want to let people know if you get stuck in the grocery store, scan your receipt.
It's getting there's a place in Perugia that did that. I don't know if it's a chain. I never pay attention. I think Pam, the grocery store, is more commonly has that than other ones. It's always a little weird, not weird to me, but it's more like, it's weird because it often happens not after you go through the person checkout line, but almost often when you go through the self-checkout line, they make you scan the receipt, and it's just sort of
we try not to do. We try to use the regular people, person, but sometimes you have to use the self-checkout.
Well, there's that one in Florence that didn't even have people. It was just self-checkout, which was really wild. I was like...
Very weird.
There's always at least one person I can ask questions to even. So anyway, that was a little strange. But I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for the... scan your... If you can't figure out... Don't throw away the receipt immediately, basically.
Yes.
You might need it to leave. But talking about food, we did talk about these cicchetti bars before called baccaros or baccaros. I'm assuming it's baccaro, but I'm not really sure. Or baccaretto, which is like a little bar, but it's basically, it just stands for tavern. So if you see it, I only see it stands for...
Viennese? Yeah.
Venetian.
What am I talking about? We're not in Vienna. We're in Venice.
But I love that. You're like, it's a Viennese word. I kind of like that. Coffee, Viennois.
It's a dialect, right? Yeah. That was my point.
And actually, it confused us at first only because there is baccalà, which is a salted cod that is a popular dish in Italy. And so seeing baccaro, we were like, is that a place that makes baccalà? And so we actually had to look this up and to figure out that it's a Venetian dialect word for tavern. So that helps. If you see that everywhere, it just means tavern, right? Instead of like, I think you'll see osteria as well, like a place to eat food, but the baccaro seemed to be more of a place for cicchetti.
Mm-hmm. It's like a wine bar.
It's a wine bar.
Often what they are, yes.
And we talked about this before, but we want to kind of revisit it because I think when we talked about it before, there are a few flaws. One, we were only in pretty much one neighborhood, that a lot of the cicchetti bars did close at 8. And this time we ended up in a bunch of different neighborhoods and found that some of them do close at 10 and 11, which made it feel like the city was open a little later. Mm-hmm. I was happening and hopping a little bit later. I was telling my dad, it's like things were happening.
It also made it possible to have cicchetti as dinner.
Yes.
Which we were trying to do before on our previous trip, but because we were in the neighborhood where they closed early, it was very difficult to do that.
And that was what we found because this time we went to Venice knowing that people eat at like 7 and we were ready for that. We were prepared this time. And last time we went assuming that people are going to eat early, but like not like, disgustingly so.
Not before 8 p.m.
Yeah. And that's exactly when they did. So when we went out for cicchetti the first time, we're like, oh, because we had to, I think, wine at one place and we went back for cicchetti and then it was already closed. And we thought, how are you already closed? And we couldn't, like the entire day, we kept searching through the neighborhood for a place to eat. And we couldn't. We ended up getting a slice of pizza because it was the only thing that was open. And this time we stumbled on a few different, looked up most of these places because cicchetti is kind of a bit like a dime a dozen kind of thing. Like the bars are everywhere, but they're not all good.
They're not all created equal.
Yes. And I think what we'll do is we'll actually, we have an article planned that we have to write up once I'm feeling a little better. And I'll put that in the description of this podcast. So if you're listening to this when it comes out, it won't be there. But if you're listening to this in a week, it should be there. Or if you're listening to this when it comes out, you can always revisit this. But we'll have a little article on the cicchetti places that we liked. I think we tried to do like 2 or 3 a night, basically. Like we'd have a glass of wine and a few cicchetti, and then go to another place, glass of wine, few cicchetti. So we kind of had this little like disconnected dinner kind of thing.
We did a little food tour of the cicchetti places.
Our own little food tour.
Mm-hmm. And there were some really good ones.
Oh, there
were also some instances where I accidentally ate fish.
Yes.
Because it wasn't always clear exactly what was in them, but it'll be in the article.
Well, it's also, too, is one of those things that you asked a few times, and like, does this have meat? And they're like, no, it's just fish. And that was so common that it felt like Venice.
Mm-hmm. And, I used to be used to that. Mm-hmm. There was a time when I was trying to be very clear with my words when I spoke Italian less. But now I think I just say things more easily sometimes, and I forget to be very specific, saying no meat or fish, because fish is not a meat in this country.
And that's the thing. It's like in Venice, it felt very much like it wasn't a meat. They're like, no, this is like shrimp, and that's this, and that's a chughi, and that. I'm like, okay, so I meant nothing.
But I had some great ones like gorgonzola and What's the
Honey
nut?
and walnut.
Well, it's so good. And then like a fluffy pesto one. It was like a whipped pesto cream thing. Oh, so good.
There's some good ones. And on the, actually, I would say on that first episode, I think we mentioned that we were told and we found like through Reddit and things like that, that they're all supposed to be basically a euro. And that first place we went to, they were a euro. And we're like, oh, that's amazing. Like this is 2025 and we're paying a euro for like, I mean, it's, you know, you get 10 of them, you're paying 10 euros, but.
And to be clear, cicchetti is essentially a small piece of bread, like a baguette slice size, with toppings.
Yeah, with some food on top, basically. And a lot of them have meat, and some have just cheese and meat. A lot of them have seafood. You can't like taste them beforehand or anything. There's no like,
Right.
can I get a taste? But they are pretty clear about what's on them, which is nice. So if you have no dietary restrictions, you'll have no problem. If you are a vegetarian, you will have some
Yeah,
issues.
they usually list what's in them, but like with the fish, sometimes they don't exactly list everything. So yeah, it just, you can ask.
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
should
And
tell
well, sometimes some of the places we went to had no vegetarian options, and some had like 2 or 3. But also some of the cicchetti were 2 euros, some were 3 euros, which isn't a huge difference.
I
But
think 3 was the most common price we saw.
yeah, and that was also kind of pricey, just because they're like, dang, like for 4 cicchetti, which is 2 each, we're paying 12 euros basically, and that's a lot. I mean, just for because then 12 euros plus it's like 4 euros a glass of wine. All of a sudden you're at 20 euros, and I'm like, whoa, 20 euros. That's and the thing I wanted to bring up is there's also Venice has every city it seems like has their own type of sandwich. Not really, but like I know that we talked about Florence has the schiacciata, and even Rome kind of has their own sandwich. Not really, but you know the pizza, and they have the little ones we get near the Vatican. But it's common in Venice to have the tramezzino, the little triangle sandwiches. And actually, the first night there, we basically had that, the little half sandwiches, and those are like 5 euros though. So, and even like I think in the Cicchetti bar along the water, I had a sandwich instead of Cicchetti because it was, I mean, 4 times as much food for just twice the cost kind of thing. So I wanted to mention that as well. Just if you are looking for a cheap eat, it is common to find Cicchetti bars that also have these half sandwiches called tramezzino, which is just a triangle sandwich, if that makes sense.
And I think price-wise, that's a good thing to mention. So because you and I did our research, and again, do look at our article when it comes out, because we'll do our best to list prices that are current to 2025, because there are places where you can get a glass of wine for €1.50.
Yeah.
And some of these places will have cicchetti for €1. More often, it will be a glass of wine for €1.50 and cicchetti for 2 or 3 euros. But then there are also places with glasses of wine for €5, which is wildly different.
Which is also expensive even for, I mean, both for Italy, but also for Venice. Like we saw so many places that were the wine, like the house wine started at 3, that when you went and found a place with 5, you're like 5, wow, they must be really good glasses of wine or something.
So my thing is that it can be a very cheaper way to eat and a way to eat at lots of fun, interesting places. But if you don't look out for the prices, it can become expensive.
And on that note, I did want to just throw in there for those of you who like the idea of cicchetti, like the idea of finger foods, especially as opposed to dinner, you typically will not be sitting down while eating these. Almost everywhere we went had no way to sit and eat them. You're supposed to stand and eat them. I think one place we went to was a wine shop that also had cicchetti, so you kind of stand on this little bar. Other ones too, it's really kind of wild. Like imagine a packed bar, and I think there's one we went to, it's a slammed bar, and where we ordered, which is kind of like a little corner of the bar, we were like, can we just stay here and eat? And he's like, yeah, of course you can stay there and eat. And we're like, oh. And he I thought we were in the way, basically. I thought like this is where, I thought we were at the spot you're supposed to order from because people kind of lining up behind us. And it was like, no, he's just like, yeah, you can just stay there. You can stand wherever and eat.
Conversely, we went into one that looked so packed in the front, and the bartender made eye contact with us, and he's like, how many are you? He's like shouting across people's heads. We're like, we're 2 people. And he's like, there's 2 seats over here. Walk around.
Yeah, that was actually
we actually got seats there. And
which is wild because nobody else, like we were the last people to sit, but then there was a ton of people just standing because again, like us, they went in, they saw a crowd of people and like, oh, I guess you have to stand here, and didn't really go deeper into the little bar. But I also wanted to mention too that a lot of, especially if you're going to go in the summer, it's going to be nicer to stand outside probably and sit along the canal. However, as I mentioned earlier, you have to be careful. Some of these places, it seems like they'll let you kind of lean along the canal or sit along the wall of the canal kind of thing.
It is very typical of these baccarò, am I saying that possibly right, that there is some outdoor seating or at least a bar to stand at sort of outside attached to the a shop, and then a lot of people will be standing and kind of leaning against the wall of the canal if it butts up against the canal.
Yeah.
That is very typical.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking there's only a few times where people would take it to like the church steps, and we did see like the people who work at the Bacaro went to the church, like, please don't sit here. We don't want to get in trouble. You guys don't want to get in trouble.
And some of them will have signs, like if they're near a church, there'll be a
please don't
sign on
sit
the
on
door
the-
saying, please don't sit on the steps of the church. Yeah.
But it can be a little bit weird because it's like, again, just as that sort of thing of like, you're expecting dinner, it's 7:30, you're hungry, so you get a couple of glasses of wine, a plate of food, and then you just go stand somewhere and eat it, and you're just like, I'm so tired, and I just want to sit somewhere. So sometimes it does seem like sitting is the not the cheaper options, but the better option, even if it's more expensive, because it is just nice to sit after a long day. And this is especially applicable if you are not staying in Venice. So if it's, if you're just walking around all day, because I think one thing I noticed about Venice, potentially unlike anywhere else, is there are really not that many places to sit.
There are not.
And it really is difficult. Like, I mean, I think in the States, we come from a town that has a lot of public benches. In Rome, there's tons of places to sit. And even if they're not, there's nothing saying you can't just sit on the ground. Like, you're totally allowed to just sit anywhere. And in Venice, you're not. There's laws against you can't sit in certain areas. So it does feel very, on one hand, hostile, if that makes sense. Like, it's sort of that hostile architecture where they put the bird spikes in places so you can't lay there. It feels very much like that. Like, there's nowhere to sit. There's nowhere to lean. They're very much on the, you have to, if you want to sit, buy a coffee. And even that was kind of wild because a lot of the places coffee was like €2. And I'm like, €2 to have it at the bar is obscene. Yeah. Given the fact that even really nice bars in the rest of Italy are €1.50. So that was a kind of a fascinating difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's everything, at least of the notes that I can read. That's everything that we have for Venice. And we might revisit this, especially because the next two episodes are going to be about the Carnivale, specifically around, should you visit? Is it interesting? What is the Carnivale? What to expect from it? And even actually, just maybe as one last note, we found that Venice for visiting, is really not that bad in terms of price if you weren't going to go for Carnivale and you were going to go in the winter.
Like hotel pricing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the two most expensive times were New Year's Eve /day and Carnivale. Mm-hmm. But I think even looked at Christmas and it wasn't that bad. And because we were looking at like, let's just go in January or some point. And we're like, wow, it's like $100 a night to stay at a really nice hotel. I think we spent $120 a night, $130 a night to stay at a decent hotel, but not like, wow, this is luxurious. Right. But because it was Carnivale, we spent a lot more. But no, it's just, I mean, in the same one that was 100, I think it was like 250 during Carnivale. But it was nice to be like, wow, if you really want to go like on a luxurious, amazing hotel, the time to go is January because that was super cheap. Mm-hmm. It's just also January in Venice. So more often to be cold and rainy than anything else.
But it's still amazing. It's
still Venice. Yeah. Oh, that was the last thing. If we still have our dear listeners are still listening in before you click away, I did just want to throw out one thing. If you wanted to ride a gondola and you didn't want to spend €90 because it is a flat fee of €90 to take a gondola ride, there is a way to take a gondola ride for a whopping €2.50.
And it's so fun.
There are 3 ways to cross the Grand Canal, which pretty much splits like the two major parts of Venice. There is the bridge just across from the train station, which I think it's called like Santa Maria, because I think so. I think the train station is called the Santa Maria, so I think the bridge is Santa Maria. There is the Ponte Rialto, which is the famous bridge. It's very much like the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. It's a bridge with all the shops on it. And then there's the Ponte Accademia, the academic bridge. There's also, kind of near the Rialto, kind of near, I don't know what's on the other side, it's just like a strip, basically it's a gondola bus. Mm-hmm. And it's a gondola. It's a proper gondola. They have all the seats removed. So you sit on the actual edge of the boat, which is a little bit scary because it's a little like, oh, we might fall in. And it was a little choppy when we went there too. It was a little bit like, this is not the best, but it's $2.50 a person.
Plus, whenever you get in, it's, if you're someone who's never been on a small boat before, it might be startling, but it's going to be fine. So when you step in, every time someone steps on the edge to get into the boat sways heavily to that side because the weight suddenly is on one side of the boat. So it's a little startling, but it's really fun.
It was a little, I think everyone who got on was like, whoa, we're going to and then of course they do tell you very quickly, sit down.
Yeah, there were some people who were like, "Oh, I don't know where to sit," and they were like, "You need to sit right now."
Yeah,
I mean, they
like,
were nice.
No, but they're very sweet.
Yeah.
But they were very like, you need to sit though.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was just like this. Like, I guess there was two when we were there. They're just kind of funneling people, but I think it was 10 at a time or 12 at a time, back and forth, for €2.50 a person, and it's just kind of fun because it's like, if you don't want the €90 gondola ride, if you don't have the budget for it, or if you're just like, I don't want to sit in a boat with some guy who's on his phone while he's giving a gondola ride, because a lot of these guys are on their phone, which is hilarious to me. Like,
Not the whole time though.
some of the time.
Yeah.
Well, because they're pushing the water and they're chatting with their friends, or they're like
Yes.
on their phone, and then
It is amazing to just stand and watch the gondoliers, especially when they're parking or taking off. It was, I mean, I really like people watching, but that was,
well, they're all, it's
tip-top
just
for
very
me.
interesting. Yeah, it's just all kind of weird, like but just interesting people doing interesting things. But if you
Manning
want,
boats.
yeah. And if you want to take a gondola ride, that is a way to do it. It's just kind of fun. $2.50. It doesn't even take a minute. It takes me 45 seconds on the open water.
It's cool too, because one thing I do want to mention, obviously, if you know anything about Venice, you might know how windy the streets are. I seriously
Estimated?
yes, thank you. I underestimated how windy and narrow some of these streets would be. And to take this gondola on either side, you go down a narrow lane and a narrow alleyway to get there, which looks very unassuming, and then opens up onto, a small mooring.
But even the mooring is basically a couple planks of wood nailed to some pilings. It's not like that metal ramp you might see like a ferry. It's like, oh no, this is just a piece of rope and some planks, and then you go down the planks, and then some guy's like, you want to get on the boat? And you're like, yeah, here's $2.50. But the coins are also like on the side of the boat, like they're on the little railing on the side, or not railing, but like this edge.
They're barely on the lip that you sit on is where they keep the coins and the change.
It was wild to me, and it's like I'm like, do you guys get this? Is the I don't know, this is like not the fun duty, like is this like equal to the toilet cleaning duty, like being
They seem to be having fun though.
I would have a blast. Oh my god, I was like, they were hiring gondoliers last year, I think they were, which is the first time they've ever like hired people outside of the families that do it, kind of thing. I don't know how many applications they got, but if next time they open up applications, y'all, we will let you know if you want to be a gondolier.
I think you should do it.
I would look great in that sweater. That is the only thing I want.
They're sponsored by,
I think it's merino wool, or
like Pure Merino Wool is a brand, and they have nice little sweaters.
They have little striped
Really
little
cute.
thing. That's all I want. I just want a little sweater. They also have terrible pants though. When the pants look like polyester, I'm like, guys, you can't
I wonder if you can choose your own pants.
I hope so. I hope this is just like the cheapest black
Maybe
pants.
they're
I can
like
find.
quick dry in case you get wet.
That could totally be it. It's not. It could be like
That would make sense.
do a total episode on gondoliers at one point. I think that's everything though. I think that's all I had.
I do have one quick note. It's really just a traveling in crowds kind of a note, is that because there were just the sheer amount of people who were there, I think I saw so many people who were a little bit rude, more than we would normally see in our regular life. And I started getting sort of like grumpy about it. Just like, oh my gosh, everybody here is so rude. And then I thought about it, and that's not true at all. There were so many lovely, kind people we interacted with. All of the people who seemed to be Venetian were incredibly nice. I mean, just from the people who worked at our hotel, who they're in the tourism industry, they're going to be nice. But then just people who were clearly lived there, walking on the street, passing their friends, saying hello, seemed lovely. I ended up bumping into somebody just because there were crowds, and the person in front of me kind of stopped a little bit to take a bite of something, and I bumped into her, and my American brain was like, oh, she's going to be, so grumpy with me. And she turned around. It was just the loveliest person. It was like talking in Italian. She's like, it's no problem. And so we interacted with, and like the bartender guy who found us the seats. Like there were so many lovely, lovely people. It's just a warning that especially if you're in a very crowded situation, you might end up getting bumped. You might end up being around people who are rude just because the sheer amount of people. But I highly recommend that you look on the bright side and think about the nice people who are around, because I almost got in a place where I was going to be grumpy until I reminded myself of all the kind, lovely people we were interacting with.
That's good though. I like that. That's a good note to end it on too.
Thanks.
So that being said, this has been our lovely episode on Venice Revisited, and we're going to have 2 more on Carnivale this month, and then we're going to have one on our general travel tips, because we just wanted to kind of visit those, because every time we travel, we remember things that has become second nature, but also they're just things that we keep doing and realize, you know what, people might benefit from these. So as you are planning your trips, we thought it might be nice to come out with those, and then we're going to continue talking about. I think we're going to talk about cities. As we haven't really hit the end of our How to Live in Italy, we'd like to continue that, but we wanted to kind of move it back into talking about like Naples and then some cities in the south like Matera and maybe even Sicily and places like that. So with all that being said, we have a lovely roadmap for y'all, and we can't wait to, I don't know, talk about things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be coming out with lots more articles on our website. There are already many, many there written by Nathaniel
And Darcy.
one by Darcy. Darcy's going to be writing more. Darcy's been busy with painting. I can stop talking about myself in the third person. We're going to have lots of articles coming out is the point, and you can check those out at onlyabag.com. And also, if you have any questions, we still have an Instagram for not very much longer. It's Only a Bag Podcast. We are also moving over to Blue Sky. Definitely contact us there if you want to reach out. We're Only a Bag.
Yeah, I think it's just only a bag.
Okay. We also have an email, which is onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions about any upcoming trips or suggestions for episodes, anything like that.
With that being said, thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Oh, and you can follow us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Oh, absolutely.
Follow us. Tell
And
your
leave a
friends.
review.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ciao a tutti. What do I say?
Tanti abbracci.
Tanti abbracci.
I love it. The ciao a tutti. We're going to try something new. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening.